First of all, Tim, thank you for joining us. Where do you reside today, Tim? Where's home?
Chicago's still home.
Oh, I love it. I love Chicago.
Yeah.
My wife's from there.
Yeah, I know you do.
First
of all, thank you for both of you for letting me on the show. Really appreciate it.
Oh, we loved having you. So let me start with Joy and I noticed this. Both you and Michael got very emotional last night on questions about the relentlessness it takes to win. And I thought it was a surprising moment for Michael to get emotional. And then I watch you and I think, boy, Tim's getting emotional over the same thing. What is it about that journey, that work ethic that makes you emotional?
You know what, Colin? It's all consuming. And that's what people don't understand. It's all consuming. It's like everything matters. Every detail matters. Every play that you saw in a game, everything the coach said, everything that your teammate did or didn't do. It's all consuming because it's all about getting that end result. You know, what he said is just like, you know, I was going to win at all costs. And those are the costs that people don't want to pay. And then when you finally talk about it, it's so hard for others to understand what you went through, and just to kind of, you finally have a chance to let it out, and it's not that easy. It's just like, you know, for me, just to be able to witness what he did every day from a workout standpoint, from a practice standpoint, from a preparation standpoint, it's just like, like I said, it was all consuming.
Michael was somebody too, Tim. He'd have a glass of wine, a big steak. He certainly wasn't vegan, but you did not. How did you, as a trainer in his body, look at? Sometimes he'd smoke cigars. He'd do things that most trainers would pull back on. But you let Michael be Michael. Never any pushback on that.
No, you know what? You have to. That's what a superior athlete, business person who's ever successful, you have to adapt to what they want to do. So my job was like, okay, he's like, listen, I'm not going to stop smoking cigars. I hired you to figure out how I can still perform at the highest level while I'm still doing the things I enjoy. That's why I hired you. That's your expertise. You can tell me, hey, so I had to do the research on a different type of cigars, different type of tobaccos. When's the best time to smoke a cigar? When's not the best time to smoke a cigar? The difference between smoking a cigar and a cigarette. That when I talk about all consuming, because that's how he was, and everybody around him, you had to be all in. You had to be all consumed in to delivering that end result, which was the most important thing for him.
It's amazing to watch when he was in Southern California, Space Jam, making the movie. And I was watching this last night, and I was thinking to myself, there are certain people I've known in my life, Tim, they can go out, tie one on, have a hangover, and then golf 36 holes in humidity in South Carolina, get up and do it for 4 straight days. And my body's just not built for that. I'll get sick. Michael at times looked like he was sleeping 4.5, 5.5 hours a night. Is part of this genetics, and that Michael had the ability to go to an area where even a Charles Barkley or a Dwayne Wade or an Akeem could not go?
Yes, he definitely did. But, one of the things is as our relationship evolved, I was able to have more input. I was like, okay, Michael doesn't sleep much at night because, like you said, and I was like, all right, Michael, how can we facilitate a nap in the middle of the day? Is that possible? Like on game day or after practice or so forth, before you start to go play golf, before you do your endorsements, before you do that. And I would present him with all the evidence. I was like, listen, sometimes there's a lot of research out there that says, and back then, the internet wasn't quite available. So
That's right.
It was like, yeah, it was like library. Let's go to the library, the Dewey Decimal System. Go get a book. Go highlight stuff and say, hey, here it is. I was like, listen, there's evidence out there that shows, a good 45-minute or even a 20-minute nap, in a certain environment, the way, the darkness of the room, the temperature, all the stuff that they were doing now, and that, all the teams are like, oh, the sleep scientists and all that stuff. We were doing way back when. We didn't have all the evidence that they had now. But, there was some research and some common sense out there. Yeah, you know what? This is what happens when you sleep and it gets too hot. You wake up, you kick the covers off. All right, so there's ways of figuring that. Michael, if we can do this, this will allow you still to maintain and perform at a optimal level. Still better than everybody else. But there's always stuff out there that you have to figure out. And my job, David Falk's job, whoever else was involved with it, like, hey, I've hired you to figure things out, because if I have to figure things out, I can't produce the best product out there as a basketball player.
Was there a first meeting with Michael? I'm sure a lot of people wanted to be his trainer. Why do you think he trusted you? Go back to your first meeting. Why did he buy into Tim Grover?
You know why? Is because, one, I was not a starstruck person. All right, I was not a starstruck person, and he needed somebody who was as obsessive as he was. They always tell you, find somebody balanced. In business and everything, find the yin and find the yang. Find somebody who's a complete opposite as you are. I'm like, no. If you noticed, everybody on Michael's team, they were just as messed up as he was.
Right.
We were all that way. So he knew I paid attention to the details. So what I would do with Michael, I would say, okay, listen. He's like, listen, I need to get stronger with for the physicality of the Detroit Pistons. And I was like, okay, Michael, so before we address that, I said, let's address all the little minor injuries that you've been getting. You'd have groin injuries, you'd have ankle sprains. I said, just by addressing those things, you're automatically going to become a better athlete. You're already going to become more explosive. You're already going to become stronger. You're already going to become faster. You're going to be able to jump higher. I said, let's address those. And then once we address those, and then we'll start working on the strength component. Then when we started working on the strength component, it was like, I said, listen, you have to tell me how this is affecting your game, positive or negatively. All right, so I can make the adjustments accordingly. I would tell him, I said, listen, we're going to enter a new exercise, or we're entering a new phase in the workout. You're going to have to make an adjustment in practice. You're going to have to make an adjustment in the game, because your shot is going to be affected, and it's going to probably be effective for 48 hours, 60 hours, 72 hours. So I was kind of giving him the formula as things were going to happen in the future. We did this exercise, this is how you're going to feel. We did this is what's going to happen. These are the adjustments that you need to make in order to bring this to where you want it to be.
Was there a moment with Michael that he was in the best shape of his life?
After Space Jam.
God, that schedule was rigorous. So after Space Jam, that's the year he was ticked off.
Yeah.
He'd lost to Orlando. He was pissed.
Yeah, and also unlike the times before, usually when Michael, they'd win the championship, and I would give him time off. I'd say, hey, listen, because you're playing all the way through basically the end of June. So I would say, okay, listen, Michael, we're going to start up. Like we always kind of started like on Labor Day. That was our thing. That was just like, he did his thing, and he did his endorsements. He had to do all the other stuff, spend time with the family, vacation, all that, go golf, see what you need to do. And he got all that taken care of. Once Labor Day started, it was like workout, golf, workout, golf, workout, golf. That's all it was until training camp arrived. This allowed us, we literally started the next day. And it allowed him, the one thing that he didn't have in the previous years that he had that year, he had to spend a lot of time in one location. So everything was in LA. So if you had meetings, everybody had to come to him. It wasn't like he was going everywhere else. It was like, okay, I got to shoot this movie. I forgot how long the weeks were, how long it took, but it was just like, So he's in one location. So when you're in one location, it allowed me to kind of eliminate the other variables that I had to deal with on a regular basis. Yeah, I knew, okay, they would give me his shooting schedule. And, Michael back then was still a very, vocal and powerful individual. So if he looked at the shooting schedule and something in there he didn't like, when you're the star of stars, you can make the adjustments accordingly.
Before Tim Grover joining us, his book is Relentless, From Good to Great to Unstoppable. It's fantastic, by the way. I read it years ago. When did Michael first say to you, get me in baseball shape? I need to be different, which is, I don't even know what that is. But when was the first time you heard, Tim, get me in baseball shape?
So this happened. So what happened was after they won the second championship, and obviously they had so when we were in the locker room celebrating, and then one of my jobs was he would always tell me, he goes like, listen, what's next? Like, because he always knew, he goes, if I come back exactly the same as I came back the previous year, I'm not going to be holding this trophy. I'm not going to be holding this trophy. So what do I need to do? And then it was funny when we were celebrating, I said, listen, I'm going to get to work on next season. And he whispered in my ear, he said, baseball.
Wow.
I looked at him. I was like, baseball? He goes, yeah, baseball. So even a year before they had even started going to prepare for the three-peat, he had already mentioned to me baseball. And it was funny. So literally that night when I went home, I started working on a baseball workout for him. I literally started right away. I was like, okay, let me start putting all this together. And then, when we started training again, so I had the baseball workout, I had the basketball workout. And I think I might have told you this story before, you read it somewhere, but I asked him, I said, when we met, I said, baseball or basketball? He said, basketball. So we started the basketball workout. So I had already knew this was something he was contemplating of doing a year before that.
Yeah, as an author said last night, there's also an author of his book, Rare Air, that noted the same thing. Tim Grover. The book is Relentless, Good to Great to Unstoppable. Folks, we got nothing but time to read. Buy it, read it. Fascinating stuff. Tim, it's a pleasure. If I'm in Chicago, I'm going to look you up. I promise. I have great respect for you, and I appreciate you coming on our show today.
And Colin, anything you ever need, you just reach out. You've been extremely gracious to me from day one, and I don't forget things like that.
CEO, owner, Attack Athletics, Tim Grover. Thanks, Tim. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.